answer if I asked really, really nicely? Would you be my new best friends? Right. This is going to be fun. You know things will get sometimes.
What have you brought here, Doctor?
I don't know. There's no use being squeamish. We've got the future to save. We don't have any more time. Anything could happen. I don't want it to end.
Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail, and welcome to the second video in a new series that I'm doing where I'm going to be ranking every single story from a particular Doctor's era in a tier list format, so you get an idea of which stories I think are good, which stories I think are bad, and which stories I think are just okay. Now, in the last video in the series, I ranked every single 15th Doctor story from the Ncuti Gatwa era, from the Church on Ruby Road all the way to the Reality War. And in today's video, if you can see what I've got behind me, I'm going to be ranking every single 13th Doctor story from the Jodie Whittaker era, from The Woman Who Fell to Earth all the way to The Power of the Doctor. Now, if you haven't checked out my Ncuti Gatwa video, I will put it in the description below and put a link towards it at the end of the video. But you're also probably wondering, where on earth is a 14th Doctor video? Surely you should do the 14th Doctor before the 13th Doctor, because I am going to be going backwards, so from 15 all the way down to 1. Yeah, and the reason I haven't done the 14th Doctor is because there's just not enough stories to truly, in my opinion anyway, warrant a full video. But once I've done all the Doctors, maybe I'll come back and do a 14th Doctor video. But for now, I'm just going to do the core ones that have multiple series to talk about. So like I said, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Jodie Whittaker era, which I remember back when this came out from 2018 to 2022. This was a very controversial era. This was, for a lot of people, where a major decline in Doctor Who happened. And upon reflection, I've really grown to like the Jodie Whittaker era a lot more than I did when it first aired, but we'll get into that in the video right now. And just keep in mind before I start this that this is just my personal opinion, so if there's stories on this list that I rank low and you really love them, that's okay. This is just my opinion and it should not change your love for the stories, and then vice versa. But without any further ado, let's jump straight into this video ranking every single 13th Doctor story. Okay, so here we are on the ranking every 13th Doctor episode tier list. And yeah, there's a lot more episodes on here than on the Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor one. Because yeah, Ncuti's era was cut short, but Jodie did get 3 seasons and a series of specials, a bit like the 10th Doctor played by David Tennant. But we've got 5 different categories here, and I used different quotes from her era to represent them. So for the top of the shop, we've got, "There's one thing I'm certain of, when people need help, I never refuse." Because yeah, that's like a Doctor motto, and that is true for all Doctors. When people need help, they very rarely ever refuse. Then we've got, "Nobody else got to be us. Nobody else got to live our days." So that was towards the end of Power of the Doctor, when Yaz and the Doctor were sat on the TARDIS. The Doctor obviously about to regenerate. We have then got "Keep your faith, travel hopefully." So this is sort of your in the middle of the road. So these are the okay stories. So these are the outstanding ones. These are just good. These are okay. Then we've got, "What do you call this look? Junkyard chic." So this is bad stories, or stories that are not great. They're not terrible, but they're not exactly good stories either. And then finally we've got, "I should say a reassuring thing now, shouldn't I?" We all know which story this is from, and we might get onto that when we get to that particular episode. But this is the stories that are just god-awful, terrible stories in every way, shape or form. But let's just jump straight into this tier list for the Jodie Whittaker era. So the very first story we've got is The Woman Who Fell to Earth. So obviously Peter Capaldi left the show, and then obviously we've got the 13th Doctor who crashes into the lives of Ryan, Graham, Yaz, and Grace in this story. falling through a train because she was thrown from the TARDIS after regeneration, and battles against the evil Tim Shaw, or Tim Shah, who's like an overarching villain of series 11. However, this series was known for its, changing things up. And this might surprise a few people, but I actually really enjoyed The Woman Who Fell to Earth, so I'm actually going to put it in the good category of nobody else got to be us, nobody else got to live our days, because this is just your generic post-regeneration story, and it's neither here nor there. There's none of the tropes that sort of come in to the Jodie Whittaker era really are present in this one. It's got some beautiful shots of Sheffield, lovely music. You actually get to see the characters in their lives beforehand, Graham with all his bus travels, you've got Yaz, the policewoman in training and stuff like that. You get to actually experience what the companions experience, and I quite like that. And then the Doctor's still doing her typical regeneration, post-regeneration sickness stuff. And Tim Shaw was a pretty good villain. I think he should have just been a one-off villain. But for a first villain of a new era, can't really complain too much. And a good little cliffhanger at the end, even though it was a bit silly, the Doctor and co getting stranded in space where they should have just, popped it, but they didn't. A bit of a silly ending. But yeah. And I was, as a massive Peter Capaldi fan, seeing Jodie dressed in Capaldi's gear, it actually quite suited her, to be fair. I was crying, especially when she did the iconic Doctor change scene where she got rid of the clothes. But yeah, so I quite liked it, if I'm perfectly honest. The Ghost Monument. This one is going into, what do you call this look? Junkyard chic, because the Ghost Monument is dull and boring. It could have been an interesting concept, this big space race where they're all trying to search for this golden object, this grand treasure by the end, which turns out to be the TARDIS. Because obviously, and they could have made this like a plot line for Series 11, find the TARDIS, but they were like, nah, let's just get it out of the way in episode 2. And there wasn't many participants in the race to begin with, and there was no real threat because none of them were really truly racing each other. They were all more buddies. There wasn't an awful lot going on. They did like tease a plot thread that wouldn't be made apparent until the finale of the next season, where they hint at the timeless child. Visually, it looked okay, and music's pretty good, but overall, it was a pretty lackluster and boring story. And apart from getting to see the TARDIS at the end, I usually skip this episode, to be perfectly honest. Seeing the TARDIS for the first time is nice, but overall, pretty dull and boring. And you don't really get invested in the race. There's not enough to make you invested, especially when you know what it is they're after. It's pretty, yeah. Then you got Rosa. Now, this story actually grew on me more and more. I quite like Rosa, so I'm actually going to put it into good. The life of Rosa Parks, the bus boycott, a proper historical story, which is really, really... Now, this story actually grew on me more and more. I quite like Rosa, so I'm actually going to put it into good. The life of Rosa Parks, the bus boycott, a proper historical story, which is really, really good. And you've got this like interstellar space racist who's obviously coming to meddle with time. Me and my fiance say this time and time again. The guy in this, the antagonist, should have been the meddling monk. 100% should have been the meddling monk. But obviously Chibnall wouldn't have done that because in this series he really wanted to hammer home new stuff. But this is exactly the calling card of the meddling monk. And it should have been done. But it is painted beautifully. The person who plays Rosa does a fantastic job. Good portrayal, good historical story, teaches the kids an awful lot, tackles obviously racism in a really good way. I quite like the story. I originally wasn't a huge fan of it, but the more I've watched it, the more I've actually grown to it. So it is, I think it's a really good story. Then we've got Arachnids in the UK. This one is going straight in the bottom in, I should say, a reassuring thing now, shouldn't I? My goodness, this story is awful. It is a terrible story. I'm not a huge fan of it. Obviously, it's got the the Donald Trump-esque character in this as well. And obviously it's got the, I was about to say iconic moment, but not iconic. It really goes to show that the 13th Doctor's character was a little bit of a mess by the end, and a bit hypocritical in her messaging that she's trying to send out, because her way of defeating the spiders is to trap them to suffocate in a room for ages and slowly get killed off. as opposed to the Donald Trump character. I'm just going to call him the Donald Trump character because everyone does. I think his name's Jack. But instead of his method, which is just to shoot it and put it out of its misery, it's weird that they actually make you side with him more than the Doctor. It's really weird. The 13th Doctor does have a few moments like that in her era where you sort of question her morality. And yeah, it's not a good look for her. And the story itself, just, they don't do an awful lot with the spiders either. They look alright, but they just don't do enough. You know, it's called Arachnids in the UK, but you don't really get to explore a lot of the UK. You know, I feel like they could have done something more with that. The Sarangna Conundrum with the Pating. This one for me is also not a good story. I'm putting that in what do you call this look, junkyard chic. I wasn't a huge fan. I like the Pating. The Pating is a cute villain, don't get me wrong. But just nothing really stands out to me. It's just a bit of a weird mess of a story. And just one that I usually, when I do a Jodie Whittaker run, I usually want to skip over or I just have on in the background to get through. Because, yeah, it's not the best, to be honest. You know, no one can really truly blame me. Then we've got Demons of the Punjab, which I think is okay. You know, it's another one of those historical stories or pseudo-historical stories, should we call it that, where there is an alien element into it. But there's some beautiful messaging. You get some good interactions and truly see that the Doctor does struggle at times with her new feminine persona. You know, there's a scene where all the women are getting ready in one room and all the men are in another room, and the Doctor goes to go with the men and then gets called out and is like, where are you going? And the Doctor's basically like, oh, sorry, yeah, no, that's right, I need to go over here now. It is really, really good. And yeah, it's beautiful and ends on this really luscious, like Indian-esque song, which is really, really nice. I quite like it. Beautiful scenery and setting and all as well. And the villains, alright, I suppose the alien aspect I'm talking about here, they're neither here nor there. That's kind of the problem with Chibnall's first season in particular, is he felt like he had to throw in villains because it's Doctor Who, but he didn't really know what to do with them per se, and that's sort of the result we get in stories like Demons of the Punjab and Arachnids in the UK. There's not an awful lot of meat to the bone there, because he's trying to focus more on the historical aspect rather than the aliens. Then you've got Kablam. To be fair, I quite enjoy Kablam. Getting to see, it's a bit of a messaging about the lives of retail workers, the lives of people in Amazon, and how they are treated and stuff like that. I like the little Kablam man robots. You get one of the very few references to the past in this story as well. The Doctor puts on a fez because apparently the Doctor ordered a fez with them and it's only just now arriving, and which Doctor ordered a fez. It's going to be the 11th Doctor, isn't it? But yeah, it finally arrives. And there's this weird thing about the bubble wrap that they are using. If you pop the bubble wrap, it basically is like a bomb and that blows up. And that's their sort of plan. There's this internal conflict and revenge scheme going on. This sort of rebellion within the workhouse and the warehouses. They got this series as well also had a theme of putting in high-end actors and comedians into things. Like Lee Mack is in this as well. He does a pretty good job, to be fair. Nice little cast of crew of characters. It's just a fun little story, and I don't mind Kablam. I would say it's nothing. I mean, I put it in good, but it can't go above good. It sort of teeters on good to just okay. It depends on my mood at the time. I don't think Kablam's terrible, but I can see why people might not like it. Then you've got the Witchfinders. For me, the Witchfinders is just okay. This is obviously a proper story where the Doctor's gender in particular really plays a big role, because the Doctor is accused all through the story of being witchcraft. Fairly certain there's even a line in this particular story where she talks about that if she was a bloke, none of this would have been happening. And I know at the time that got a lot of people wound up a little bit, that they're constantly almost doing these digs towards men, towards women. I don't really know why that had to be a main focal point of the show. The Doctor's an alien. The Doctor's an alien from an alien world, sci-fi adventures and fighting monsters. We don't need to bring that into this, really, and make it a massive deal. But, that is sort of a focal point of the story as well. Is back in those days, yes, the Doctor sort of would have been conceived or seen as a witch, you know, especially when she's waving around her sonic screwdriver. I think Alan Cumming is also in this as well, who does return in the Shooty era, who plays Mr. Ring-a-Ding. He does a pretty good job in this as well. He sort of has a bit of a fling with Ryan, I believe, in this story, and kind of wants Ryan to stay towards the end, but obviously Ryan doesn't do that. And yeah, I should mention as well, through the series, do the companions do anything? Not really. You very rarely see Ryan, Graham and Yaz doing an awful lot. Graham is definitely the best of the trio in this particular series, but not an awful lot happens. Most of the day gets saved in this series, not really through the intervention of our core characters, our core four. It's usually other people who do the job for them, to be honest. And it's almost like they just happen to be there. And that's really unfortunate for me. And something that I think lets the Jodie Whittaker era down a little bit. Then we got It Takes You Away. I'm not a fan of It Takes You Away. I'm really not a fan of it, and this might shock a few people because I know that originally this had quite positive reviews. I didn't really like it. It wasn't for me. You know, it's set in Norway, and there's got this big mystery about this widower who's, you know, struggling to move on. You've got this daughter who I believe is blind, and there's this mirror up in their cottage in Norway that takes them to this other world. This is also the story that has the weird Grace Frog scene, which is a bizarre use of effects. You can see that the budget was running out. It's just a mess of a story, and the Doctor's really weird in it. I'm not a huge fan of it. Again, it's another story that I haven't chosen to watch in a very long time. I do need to give these stories a bit more of a rewatch. I'm mostly basing these off the last time I watched them, which, especially the early ones from season 11, is quite a long time ago. But from what I remember, I didn't really like it. And if I can't remember a story, because I'm a massive Doctor Who fan, I've watched probably all the classic series from Hartnell to Paul McGann in particular, probably like a billion times each. And I can recite lines, I can remember episodes that I haven't watched for a very long time. But there's some Jodie stories that I just can't do that with. And if I can't, then it's not stuck with me. And in my mind, wasn't a memorable or brilliant story. And that's why it's got to go down towards the bottom, if I'm honest. And I think everyone would agree with me here. If I'm putting the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos also in, I should say, a reassuring thing right now, shouldn't I? Because apparently it was a first draft that was put out there. And that is just laziness. And it was a very rushed finale. There was a stumbling mess. The plot made no sense. They randomly brought back Tim Shaw. They almost made Graham into a murderer, which is definitely not in his character. Yeah, I didn't like it. It was a terrible finale. Probably the worst finale of all of New Who, debatably, because it was just dull, boring, had no real impact, just tried to change characters. And the fact that it was, I believe that they did confirm that it was a first draft. That's awful. Terrible. You shouldn't put your first draft for a finale to a series out there. Shouldn't be happening. Shouldn't be happening, Chibnall. Need to do better. Need to do better. Then we got Resolution, which brought back the Daleks. Again, I think that one's just okay. You know, they tried to bring back the Daleks for, you know, the long-term fans because he'd had complaints all series that it was, you know, too detached from what came before and we needed something from the show's history. So he gave us, you know, the obvious thing, give you a Dalek first. And, you know, I get it, yeah, start with your big hitters. But was it done right? No, not really. You got to see a Dalek in a more unique way. It mostly focused on the Dalek mutant being attached to this person. But we want to see a Dalek doing what a Dalek does. You know, in its casing, saying exterminate, hovering around, shooting its gun, using its sucker, whatever. You know, the one-eye stalked tank. That's a Dalek. When we just see the big squid, which mostly is covered up under like the clothes of the female that it's attached to, that's not really a Dalek. And then they got this whole subplot going on with Ryan's dad who magically comes back and it distracts from the core plot of seeing the Dalek. I'm just not a huge fan of it. And I know a lot of people aren't. But when the Dalek mutant does build, you know, that makeshift Dalek tank armor, it does feel a bit better, and obviously hearing Nicholas Briggs come back as the voice of the Daleks was really nice. So I'd say like the last 15 to 20 minutes of the story is pretty good, but the first part is a slog fest to get through. So that's why it's just okay, because it's a very mixed bag for me. Then you got Series 12, which starts with two-parter, Spyfall Part 1. I really like Spyfall Part 1. For me, it's going up here in Nobody Else Got to Be Us and Nobody Else Got to Live Our Lives. I liked Spyfall Part 1. You know, very James Bond-esque. That's why it's called Spyfall, you know. But it is definitely ripping off James Bond. Really, really good. Secret agent, doctor on a mission, brings all her crew back together to solve this grand mystery, recruits some help from an old friend called O, who, in one of probably my favourite twists of modern series, turns out to be a brand new incarnation of the Master, played by Sacha Dhawan. And Sacha Dhawan is probably, debatably, my favourite New Who version of the Master. After, you know, well, no, he is my favourite New Who Master, and then probably John Sim. But I love Sacha Dhawan's Master, and I thought the reveal at the end was perfect. Brilliant. Didn't expect it at all. I don't even think there was, like, teasing of it before the series came out. So that was brilliant. And I thought he did a fantastic job in that final scene. Great start to a series, a lot better. Both the openings so far of Jodie's series have been pretty good. It then just falls off a bit. Which happens here, because I'm not a fan of Spyfall Part 2. I think Spyfall Part 2 is definitely down in what do you call this junkyard chic, because apart from Sacha Dhawan, nothing else I really enjoy, because, you know, again, it's a bit like the Dalek. You bring back the Master, but you spend most of the episode away from the Master, and back on Earth with Ryan, Graham and Yaz on the run. They've been made fugitives by the Master and his little accomplice, who's helping him. And so it tries to be the Sound of Drums, but like a diet version of it, and a not very good version of Sound of Drums. So I'm not a huge fan of it. And obviously you've got then the tease again of the Timeless Child, and also the destruction of Gallifrey, which the Master says he did, but didn't tell the Doctor why. We get nice references to the past as well, and I quite like it. You know, the knocking 4 times, you know, the thing that happened, the Sound of Drums, you know, with John Sim's Master. It was all nice, you know, but it all felt a bit all over the place. A bit of a mess, if I'm perfectly honest. So that's why it's down quite lower on the list. Orphan 55 is down here. It is a terrible story. Terrible story. Very heavy on its messaging about pollution, about how that we're damaging the planet and one day, you know, it's going to all die and we're going to turn into these monsters and this, that and the other. It's really hammered home and it's in your face. We don't need that. You know, Doctor Who's always been political. Let's be real here. We can't sugarcoat it. We can't say that it's just been since like late Capaldi, Jodie and onwards now. It's always been political. They've just been better at handling it in the past and made it a little bit less in your face, whereas this one is really in your face. And also the woman who and her husband who are there getting engaged and whatever, on their honeymoon, I can't quite remember now. You know the woman, the one who shouts Benny every 5 seconds. She's so annoying. They got the guy who plays Jay in The Inbetweeners, who I love him in The Inbetweeners, but he was wasted here, terrible, with weird green hair. This whole thing of there's this alien parasite in the vending machines and you got to suck your thumb. It sounded like a toddler wrote this story, and it was absolutely horrendous. Terrible, terrible, deserves its place on this list. If you enjoy Orphan 55, all the power to you, but I personally can't see it. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, I think that one's okay. I think that one's just it's an okay story, focusing on the character and the figure of Nikola Tesla. Then they got these weird scorpion-like creatures, which I swear they said that there's like a link between them and the Rachnos, whether they're like a sister species or a cousin species or something. I might be wrong there, and I probably am, but I swear there was a link somewhere. But they looked cool as well, and I'm fairly certain the person who plays the main Scorpion Queen lady is also the person who plays Rani in the Sarah Jane Adventures, who's married to Sacha Dhawan. So there you go, another little link there. Yeah, I thought it was fun, and the person who plays, you know, Nikola Tesla does a very good job as well. Again, this is another story where the Doctor and co sort of feel like they're playing second fiddle to the historical figure, so yeah, that tends to happen in Jodie's era. It's an okay story, though. Fugitive of the Judoon, I thought was a good story. Really, really good. Not just for the obvious reasons, but, you know, obviously it brings back the Judoon, a big favourite from the RTD era. Everyone loves the Judoon, and they're brilliant here, although these are a female species of Judoon who have mohawks. Yeah, the females get mohawks. That's a thing, apparently. But they are hunting someone, a fugitive, someone who's running from them. And the Doctor and co bump into this woman named Ruth, who's a tour guide, acts really mysterious. But it turns out that she's actually the Doctor. Yeah, she could have been the Rani, she had a fob watch, but no, Chibnall made her the Doctor, known as the Fugitive Doctor, an incarnation that Jodie's Doctor has no idea who they are, and the Fugitive Doctor doesn't know who they are, so there's a bit of confusion there. What's going on? We also get the return of John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness in this, which, again, totally didn't expect him to return here. It was lovely to see him again. He didn't get to see the Doctor in this episode, but he does in a later story. But yeah, it was lovely to see John again, and I didn't expect it. So what I will say to Chibnall is he's really good at giving you surprises. He keeps things secret, which is really good. The pacing of this story is pretty good as well, and it was entertaining, and it is one that I have gone back to watch a fair bit, to be fair. Then we got Praxeus. Yeah, not a big fan of Praxeus. That one for me goes down here. You know, another message-based one about pollution and disease and this, that, and the other, where they shove the messaging right down your throat. Not a huge fan. Not even going to waste my breath on it. It's not the worst story in the world, but it is definitely not the best. They try to do something new and go to different locations. They even throw in a line that this could be a plot by the Autons. Why didn't they make this an Auton story? This should have been an Auton story, then it would have been way better. But no, they decided against that. You know, a virus that takes over the body. You know, interesting, but should have been an Auton story. Then Can You Hear Me is also going in here as well. Don't really feel much to it. You know, we got these gods, and they invade your dreams by detaching their fingers, and the fingers go inside your ear. Again, it felt like a toddler wrote this story. Much like the weirdness of the thumb sucking in Orphan 55. They got one beautiful scene, though, in this, where it's like this hand-drawn animation, artsy style, where they're telling a big story of planets and stuff. Looks really nice, I will admit. Looks beautiful, but that's about it. The Doctor tries to go solo in this story for a brief moment and is insufferably annoying. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I skip over those stories if I can. The Haunting of Villa Diodati. This might surprise some people, but I really, really like The Haunting of Villa Diodati. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Or Diodati, I don't know. I love it. It's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, pretty much. The Doctor and co, you know, go to this like party. They're lost along the way. They're trapped in this house. The dimensions are shifting. They can't escape. And then this visitor pays them a visit. It turns out to be a lone Cyberman who's half converted, known as Ashad, who's come to find this little liquid ooze known as the Cyberium to, you know, rebuild the cyber army and make it better. Captain Jack warned about it in Fugitive of Jadoon, and then it comes back here. And it is brilliant. When Ashad lands, it is terrifying. He is scary. Because he's still half human looking, he still has a lot of emotions, and so his stomping is heavier. He screams. He yells. It is scary, and I love it. And I love all the cast and crew in this. It is a phenomenal story. I've watched it time and time again. I know there's going to be people that are being like, why on earth is that high? I just really enjoy it personally. Ascension of the Cybermen is okay. It dips a lot for me. I don't think it's very good in comparison. It's almost a three-parter, but it's kind of not. Haunting Villa Diodati feels like it's part one because Ashad comes in. Then it's this, and then it's Timeless Children, even though it's technically only a two-parter with Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children. There's these weird floating cyber heads that shoot. You know, they've gone away with Cybermats and Cybermites. Now they got floating Cyberman heads. There's randomly the Parallel Universe Cybermen. Just two of them before, and Ashad for the story, and that's it. And then you've got these Cyber Warriors, which are a new upgraded version, which look a bit like a combination of the Stephen Moffat Cybermen mixed with like the Invasion Cybermen from the 60s. Pretty cool design, I must admit, but not a huge fan. It ends with them, because the point is there's this resistance group who are trying to escape to this land to find this border to get to this mystical world where they think they're all going to be safe, which turns out to be Gallifrey, which is destroyed. The Master pops back up at the end of this story in the cliffhanger. Love you, Sasha. But yeah, it's all right. The Timeless Children, again, I think is alright. I know lots of people will be like, why is that not like bottom of the barrel? It destroyed Doctor Who canon, it messed with the lore, and this, that, and the other. But let's be real, in the grand scheme of things, The Timeless Children hasn't done an awful lot. All it did was, I know it made William Hartnell now no longer feel like he's the first Doctor, but he is. Come on, he is the first Doctor, really. And he always will be in our hearts, you know. Yeah, sure, there now might be some stuff that come out before, but think about what RTD's done lately, people. Is it really, you know... I think what RTD's done with Doctor Who since he's returned is 10 times worse than The Timeless Children. I think in comparison, The Timeless Children is a stroke of genius. And I just like the story anyway. I think Sasha's on top form. You know, him versing Ashad is brilliant. The references I love. The memories as well. And an interesting ending to a series where the Judoon come, take the Doctor, put her in prison, and she can't get out. You know, how are they going to get out of that one? I think that one's going to be really interesting. But yeah, I quite like it. Like I said, Sasha steals the show for me. They try to get the companions to do stuff, but they don't. And again, you've got this theme of the Doctor's not actually the one to save the day. The Doctor has the trigger that could stop everything, but she can't bring herself to pull it, and so gives it to someone else to sacrifice themselves, and she runs off in a spare TARDIS. Yeah, it's a shame. Then we got Revolution of the Daleks. Now, this one might surprise people that I think it's a good story. I quite like Revolution of the Daleks. I like the two factions of Daleks. Gives me Remembrance of the Daleks vibes. Captain Jack Harkness comes back properly and interacts with the Doctor, which is really, really nice. I love their interaction with each other. I think it's really, really good. However, the one thing I will say is Jack does at times play second fiddle to obviously the current companions. And also they don't use Jack's core like trait and what he's known for. He's known for being immortal and he can't be killed. He can't die. And there's even a line where he says, I'm Captain Jack Harkness and I'm immortal. And he never once does it. He mentions it earlier, saying that he can be killed but comes back to life. And then he mentions Rose. You know, there's lots of throwaway stuff with Jack that you could use. They bring back the Squareness gun, which is interesting, I suppose. But I love the design of the one set of Daleks, and then obviously the Nicholas Brigg voiced Daleks are returning as well. I like all that, and it's nice to see the Daleks, you know, having a war with each other again. Like I said, very Remembrance vibes. All you needed was Davros to magically appear. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a good story, but just had a bit of wasted potential. And took a little bit of time to get going as well. Flux, the Halloween Apocalypse. I quite like a lot of Flux. I think the first one is okay. Obviously, it's mostly just a setup. You know, because these are done in chapters like Trial of the Time Lord or The Key Time or whatever, Black Guardian Trilogy, whatever like series you want to go down. And just sets up the stuff, you know, there's this big disaster coming, there's these characters called the Ravagers who are after the Doctor, but the Doctor doesn't remember who they were because they were pre-Hartnell villains who faced the Doctor in her fugitive form. You got the return of the Sontarans, you got the return of the Weeping Angels, you got this species and this person known as Carvanista who used to work with the Doctor and now has a rivalry with the Doctor. This character called Vinda. There's so many plot lines that they just throw them at you here. They introduced a new companion of Dan because Graham and Ryan left at the end of Revolution of the Daleks. Played by John Bishop this time round, which I think he settles into the TARDIS a lot better than the other two do. Yeah, it's a bit of fun and interesting, and I like that it ends on a big cliffhanger of the Doctor and co. pretty much staring death in the face. War of the Sontarans, I think, is a good story. I quite like War of the Sontarans. The Sontarans are really, really good. It's very comedic. The Sontarans are at their best, set during the Crimean War. You know, they are tearing people apart. You get to see Dan take down Sontarans with like frying pans and stuff like that. The Doctor arguing with the Sontarans, great. The Sontaran admitting that he just wanted to come to the Crimean War to ride a horse. All fun and games, and I really, really like it. It is a fun story. Once Upon Time, though, is not very good, though. It's a bit of a jumbled mess. Not a huge fan of it. It still confuses me to this day what this was about. It tried to bring the fugitive Doctor back properly again, to try and get the Doctor to, you know, notice more of her past. It just didn't work. It just didn't work for me. It's the one story in Flux that I always skip over. I go from War of the Sontarans to Village of the Angels because Once Upon Time is not a good story in my personal opinion. I mean, some people might enjoy it, but it's just not for me. Village of the Angels is going up here. I really love Village of the Angels. Up there as one of my favourite Weeping Angel stories. I mean, my favourite Weeping Angel story is probably still Blink, as it probably is for most people, but I really like Village of the Angels. It tries to use some of the plot lines from other Weeping Angel stories, like Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone, where there's a woman possessed by a Weeping Angel, and she's starting to become a Weeping Angel, but they do it in a bit of a different way. You see Weeping Angels come out of TV screens, you see them catch on fire. You know, it is really, really creepy. The angels are creepy again, and I love that. And the Doctor even gets turned into a Weeping Angel at the end of this story. What a cliffhanger that is. Gets wasted in the very next story, but a fantastic cliffhanger nonetheless. I love Village of the Angels. Survivors of the Flux, again, not my favourite, if I'm honest. It wastes the cliffhanger of Village of the Angels, poos all over it, and is, again, it brings back Kate and Unit. There's a reference to Osgood. Where is Osgood, by the way? Can she please return? Where Unit has been infiltrated by these like serpent-like creatures. Why isn't that the Mara? I don't know. They're part of the Sumaran Empire, apparently. But they are also wasted. I think it's the Grand Serpent, I think he's called. Terrible villain. Terrible. He looks cool, but does nothing and gets defeated so easily in the next episode. Pointless. They have a nice little soundbite, though, from the Brigadier, where they go back in time to show how long the Grand Serpent has been infiltrating Unit 4, and apparently it's been since the Brigadier first joined Unit, or came into Unit, took over, which I think is interesting. Where was he in the classic series? But yeah, it wasn't the best. And then the final part of Flux is just okay. It's just okay. The big grand villains are the Ravagers, you know, the man and the woman duo, who are sinister and brilliant from the start, get killed off so easily at the end and are nothing. And this episode is basically like War of the Sontarans Part 2, because the Sontarans are the core villains in this story. The Daleks and the Cybermen cameo, but they don't really do a lot. And yeah, they sort of do the David Tennant thing of, you know, instead of he will not 4 times, Time decides to say to the Doctor, you know, your time's coming to an end soon. Beware of forces that mass against you and their master. Hinting at the stuff that's going to happen in the power of the Doctor, basically. But yeah, it was okay. But neither here nor there. Eve of the Daleks. If you've seen my ranking of the modern era, you know my feelings on Eve of the Daleks. And that is why Eve of the Daleks is going all the way up here in the top of the charts, because it was an honourable mention. I love Eve of the Daleks. I love a time loop. Simple premise. There's like 5 characters. You know, you've got the Doctor, Graham and Yaz, and then 2 other characters who are just workers there, and they get trapped by the Daleks, who are trying to get revenge on the Doctor for the events of Flux. And they're stuck in a time loop, and they keep getting killed in unique and different ways, and it's a lot of fun. It's Groundhog Day, but Doctor Who style with Daleks. What more could you want on New Year's Day? Fantastic story. I love it. It also does start to really push the Doctor and Yaz's relationship together. You know, Phasmin, I think they called it. I can't remember what they called it now, but yeah, that little bond and relationship which went nowhere in the end, but that's like really apparent in this story. Then you got Legend of the Sea Devils, which is going down here. It is awful. I'm not a massive fan of Legend of the Sea Devils at all. The design of the Sea Devils, fantastic. What they do with them is terrible. And, well, now we've got The War Between the Land and the Sea coming out, and the Sea Devils seem to potentially have a massive redesign, which I'm also not a huge fan of. There was nothing wrong with these Sea Devils. But yeah, and you've got the Super Mario jump that one of the Sea Devils does in this story, which is ridiculous, but yeah, neither here nor there. The costume design is really good, and the settings are nice. You know, I like the Doctor and Yaz and Dan's outfits in this story, and obviously the old-fashioned Sea Devil look is cool. They use some of the old sound bites from the classic series as well. I quite like that. But the plot and everything else is just falls to pieces. I'm not really a big fan of it. But then we've got the final Jodie Whittaker story, and again, if you've seen my ranking of the modern era, you know I love Power of the Doctor, and that is why Power of the Doctor is also going top of the charts, up here, you know, in S tier, so to speak, because I really, really like it. It's where Jodie properly feels like the Doctor. I know it's her final story, but you really see the Doctor in her, and it's got everything. Multi-Doctor story, bring back previous companions, the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Master, all team up in one story, and it gives Jodie the perfect send-off and celebrates the centenary of the BBC and all really, really well. I love Power of the Doctor, and it will probably be, and it for me is the true 50th anniversary and 60th anniversary, because neither 60th or 50th truly felt like they celebrated all of Who. They mostly seemed like they celebrated a particular era of new Who, if I'm honest. But this story did all of Who of classic and modern Who justice. But that is going to be my ranking of every 13th Doctor episode. I'm sorry this was a bit longer than people would expect, but there's a lot of stories to get through, and there's going to be some Doctors that will take longer than others. But I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up, and comment down below your thoughts on the list, or what would your list be? What are your favourite 13th Doctor era stories? And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.